I used to think that logic was everything, that if I just showed up with the right data, the perfect analysis, and a clear strategy, people would listen. But over the years, I've learned that decisions are rarely made just by data, they're made by people. And people bring emotions, biases, fears, and dreams into every room. And this week's episode, From a Woman to a Leader, I sat down with Rhonda Parker-Taylor, and our conversation took me right back to that realization. Rhonda's journey is incredible. She was told she wasn't smart enough. She flunked kindergarten. She barely passed high school. And yet, she went on to earn a doctorate, led organizations, published books, and even contributed to global leadership studies station at the United Nations. How? By learning to master her emotional intelligence. This episode is for any woman in tech who feels like her voice gets lost in meetings. For those of you who are told you're too emotional or not strategic enough, or who are tired of being asked to take the notes instead of lead the discussion. Rhonda gives us the tools to reframe our mindset, listen deeply and influence with empathy and clarity. And we talk about EQ versus IQ, how to build trust, how to lead change by managing emotions, not just projects, and what not to do if you want to be seen as a leader. Hi everyone, my name is Limor Bergman Gross. For those who don't know me, I'm a former director of engineering, now executive coach and host of From Woman to a Leader. And this podcast is for women in tech who want to grow, lead, and be recognized without burnout or changing who they are. So if we're ready to level up your emotional intelligence and lead with more power, confidence, and heart, this episode is for you. Don't forget to follow, rate, and share this episode with everyone who needs to hear this today. So, are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Rhonda. Welcome. How are you today?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me today. I'm so excited. I get to begin my day with you and you get to end your work day with me. So how much better can that be? And I hope that anybody listening out there just sits down, gets their cup of coffee, no matter where they are in the globe, and gets ready to talk about how your personal journey can be expanded and your influence be expanded when you realize that struggles and strengths can be addressed through emotional intelligence. And a lot of people might think that's a buzzword, but maybe by the end of this podcast, we'll be able to show everybody just the strength that we have within ourselves that sometimes we discount.
For sure. Yeah. And it's a pleasure having you here. And, I think that EQ, emotional intelligence, EQ is like so important and cannot talk enough about it. So let's dive in and maybe take us a little bit back to your journey. I know that you mentioned like you weren't considered academically like the brightest.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how it shaped you?
You're so kind to say I wasn't the brightest. I flunked kindergarten. So it started way back in the beginning of life of being behind, having challenges. At kindergarten, you're thinking, well, what all do you have to know to go to first grade? But what they looked at was my maturity level, my ability to keep up with and it kind of put a trajectory and a mindset for me that I didn't think that even with personal growth, I could have academic resilience. So I started leaning more into my social skills, the inter and interpersonal skills as I developed. So I had a wonderful childhood, but as I got even into my high school years, once again, it raised up again. I was going to a private school. You were expected to have excellence, and I wasn't doing well in English grammar, and I wasn't going to pass my English proficiency test to graduate. So for us, we had to pass this with a B. And that was difficult for me. I wasn't capable of doing it at that point, and I didn't understand why. So I had to find within myself, and thank God there was a teacher that decided that they were going to take pity on me and offer to tutor me. So I found that mentors mattered very early in life. So that mentorship impacted my whole trajectory. So what she did, she sat on the floors with me all that summer before my senior year to graduate and tutored me. And I realized that my mind was capable, but my process was failing. By listening to her and having her give me the foundational skills, I learned an empowering lesson about myself, and that was I needed to sit still long enough to listen to others and not always have to have that word or that thought that I needed to express, because I had so long been putting my emphasis on these social skills. And I found out that after I graduated that I had a higher emotional intelligence because of it. What had happened is I started reading all of Daniel Goleman books. So anybody that wants to learn
Yeah.
about emotional intelligence, I would say, go read their original research. It means that you can be successful even if you're not the brightest bulb of the bunch, because you know how to stop, pause, listen, and then you realize that that's the key to success for you. And that is that you can manage emotions and people through those skills.
For sure, and I'm a great believer in that, and a huge fan of Daniel Goleman and his work. And I think that's one of the problems stems for the fact that we are judged based on our, grades when we are,
Right.
in school,
Right.
and less
Exactly.
about other skills that we have. And as you said, like communication, soft skill, being empathetic, being able to really connect with other people, and that is not really valued in school.
No. Q is a game changer for people. It allows people to be self aware of their own thought processes and emotions and develop real leadership potential, which increases your success. This is kind of how it works. You talked about how we're based on grades. EQ and IQ are calculated basically the same. Just like IQ is your math, your reasoning, your English language skills, EQ is based on your ability to have intrapersonal skills. So your self awareness, your ability to thrive and listen to others, your interpersonal skills, which is your ability to have social responsibilities for people, and your stress management, your impulse control, or your ability to handle that stress, and your general mood. Just like IQ, EQ has a structure that it measures also. It's left brain versus right brain functioning, really, is what it is. And you find that you're more resilient when you have a better EQ. IQ is concrete. It's never changing. EQ you can build upon, and that's what's kind of important for the women, especially that are in leadership, that are always going out there trying so hard, and may need something that they can do the building blocks for their career and their skills.
Yeah, and definitely I agree with you that emotional intelligence is something that you can develop, and it's so important. So tell us maybe some practical steps that women can take to develop their emotional intelligence.
First, learn your core competencies of emotional intelligence, which I've kind of talked about them a little bit, like self awareness. How does that really, apply to leadership? Well, self awareness means you've already deconstructed your own value system, your own biases, your own thought processes about whatever the decision making that you're getting ready to do, and allows you to self regulate them. You're regulating those values and thoughts so that you can actually listen to the other people's opinions, thoughts, as they make themselves self aware about how they feel about something. And then showing empathy. Maybe you don't agree with it. Maybe you don't feel like it's the right path, but you can show empathy to pick up their thoughts and and kind of negotiate and talk in a peaceful manner by controlling the emotions and using your social skills. And then after you do that, you've adopted a people first mentality or mindset. So when you deconstruct yourself and you enter the room and you show this self awareness and control, you can help others do the same thing. And then you can leverage that empathy to help everybody in the room buy into the right decision making model that's for whatever you're doing, whether it's new, a new system, whether it's a new way of doing business, a new product, and then you lead by example.
Yeah, and I think empathy is so important. And mainly, I mean, women in technical roles, and I can say also about myself, we tend to think logically. Okay, I'm going to show up in a meeting or whatever. I'm going to show all the data, and then I'm going to be able to get buy-in or what have you. And actually, decisions are made a lot of based on emotions rather than logic.
Right. So it doesn't matter what the data says. You're talking about my job and how it's going to affect my job, or you're talking about, that this data means that we need to change processes and I don't like change and they get fearful, or, there's so many things that it can cause. And the data is typically right, but the processes and how you analyze it and how you get everybody to buy in requires building an EQ wall in the environment, brick by brick. And as you do that, you're practicing strategies that, like you said, if you can just step back and say, okay, I need to get everybody's mind shifted and their mindset shifted to accept the data.
Yeah.
Then you might get a better reaction to the change or the information that they're having to realize that, hey, sales are going down because our writing is awful in our letters, or sales are going down because we're promoting the wrong value statement to the customer, or whatever it is, that, or we're spending too much money, and this is where it's going, but this is where we're actually showing value. But when you do that, what ends up happening is you're requiring the team or the boardroom or the personalities to overcome their biases quickly. And that, especially when you do transactional, throw the data out there and there, boom, this is what the data says and we need to change. It doesn't give anybody time to get to the same point as you, and that's why the empathy model, especially in the boardroom, is so important, because you got to get them to the same point, or listen to why that data may be accurate or inaccurate, but the change may not be a valid change for the organization. Maybe the system can't handle it. You may have the data, but you don't have the systems in place.
Yeah. And Rhonda, I think you mentioned about biases, you mentioned there was a pivotal moment for you that you received advice from your sister about not serving in a boardroom. So can you share a little bit about that and how it shaped your understanding of boundaries and biases in professional meetings?
Everybody has a mental, picture of how things are, right? So I'm going to give you a personal example of something before I tell the story. When I was young, they told me I was allergic to peanuts. Don't ever eat a peanut because you'll end up in the hospital and you almost died. So my bias against peanut oil, everything was ingrained in me. Every time we would go to a restaurant, everybody in the room that, was my family was worried about whether there was any peanut oil or any peanuts or any, and so I had a bias against peanuts, right? It's already in my head. This isn't going to work. I can't have a peanut. Well, I accidentally ate peanut butter one day. Guess what? There was no reaction. And so then talking to others and, getting a few medical advices as an adult, no allergy. I can eat any peanut there is in the world, at least so far. I've not had an allergy. But every time I put that peanut in my mouth, I start sweating now. I don't like the texture. So the point in the moral to the story is we all have internal biases. So and thoughts on what is right, wrong, how things are supposed to run. So when a woman walks into the boardroom, they have to realize that some people have a bias to the fact that that leader is a woman. Some people have an understanding of what a leader's supposed to be that has a certain picture of how they act in the room. So my older sister, she's 8 years older than me, already had been in the workforce, and when I got my first major career break in corporate America, she told me, and I thought it was the oddest advice at first, don't ever make the coffee and serve your male counterparts in a meeting. And I was like, well, why? She said, because they will always put you in the visual role of being the administrator and the service, not the leader. Because they already have that mindset in there. And it made sense. When you're the one if that's what you want, because some people, that's their goal, is they want to be the supportive role. They love being the supportive role. That's who they are innately. That's okay then. But understand the bias that creates about your leadership role. Now, are you going to want to make sure that they look at you as a service? Then maybe you could make coffee and serve everybody. But the rule of thumb is you want to present the leadership role as a woman that everybody understands. You have to bridge that gap of what people's biases are, the peanut, and what they think the boardroom's supposed to look like. And that's the same thing as the emotional intelligence part of it. There are workplace biases all around us that we don't even know that aren't, as prevalent as the male female dichotomy, for instance, right? It could be accounting comes first because money matters. It might be, something, the customer comes first, even if it costs us money. So there could be all these different biases that people have in their head before you even walk into the room. So you have to realize that the personal boundaries in the communication, no matter what the data says, you have to get everybody's mindset in the same page.
For sure. And I don't know, I've never actually faced a situation when someone made coffee. I mean, at least in the companies I worked for. But one bias I did see, that women a lot of time were asked to take notes in a meeting.
That's the same thing. Why are the women the ones taking the notes? Exactly.
Yeah. Now we have AI for that. But before AI, like, yeah, if there's a woman in the room, she need to take the note.
And if she's taking the notes, she can't have an opinion because she's too busy trying to write them all down. It puts people in the corner. So there could be many of multitudes of different kinds of biases that we have to put those personal boundaries for ourselves so we can still be the leader that we want to be, and show that, listening is a core component of the room and hearing everybody inclusively. Because when we try to do the cookie cutter approach, you get out during the holiday season and you want all the trees, you want 12 trees, 12 stars, 12 Santa Clauses, and you make those cookie cutters images. And then you get into a room and there's a 13th of something that's different. Guess what? That 13th different model is important to hear because their views see something differently. Maybe it's a different department that makes them different. Maybe it's an ethnic difference, that makes them different. Maybe it's a male female difference. It can be a variety of things. Maybe it's a person that's a parent versus just a professional. So whatever their difference that is outside of the normal cookie cutter of your organization, their opinion not only matters, should be listened to, because there's something in that you can reach for other people.
Yeah. And you talk about listening, which I think also is a skill that it sounds kind of trivial, but it's actually not to really genuinely listen. So, what strategies do you have to women, and not just women, but leaders, to really listen
Well,
rather than just hear what people are saying?
The first thing is stop trying to think about your answer to whatever they're saying in the middle of the sentence, because then what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to reframe it however you want to challenge it, and you're not really listening them to hear the points or the data or whatever the information is that they're trying to relay, right? But then also practice the active listening. The part of active listening requires you to provide them feedback on your understanding, because even when we think we've heard, how many times have you been talking to a loved one and they're like, no, 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 that's not what I meant. Oh, yes, it is what you meant. And it's not necessarily what they meant. They were trying to maybe not be direct in their approach, maybe flowering it down, and making it easier. So recognize that your fact finding mission after they've expressed it is important. Is this what you meant, or did you mean something else, so they can clarify what they meant? And if they say, yes, that's exactly, this is why I think, and they can go on again about why it's important, you might hear something differently. And then you can ask questions. Well, how does that affect X department or X person's workload, or affect the product, or whatever it may be? And then you can have this exchange that's equal, that helps you understand. And with understanding, you get blessed with processes and a trusting relationship with those people. When we don't listen, you deteriorate the trust, because what ends up happening is they don't feel like they can come to you if there's a part being made inaccurately, and the tolerances aren't right, or if there's, a letter that has typos that's causing, or needing clarified, whatever the process that they normally would bring to you if they had trust, they won't do it because they'll be fearful that they won't be heard.
Yeah. And I think that in order to be a great listener, you also need to know how to ask great questions. Because, right, it's part of it. It's like putting your thoughts aside, not thinking about what you want to say next. Really listen and then ask thoughtful questions based on what the person told you.
What they told you, not what your biases have already said. Let's say someone brings something to you and we need to change this, this, and this, and this is why. And they're telling you, maybe you're even doing a great job on listening and you have active listening, but then you get challenged with it because your own biases tell you, not going to work. It's just not going to work, because that means we're going to have to put X number of dollars into it. And all of a sudden, all these signs of stop, I'm not listening anymore, appear, immediately. People know, they can sense it. So if you're not being authentic in your listening and really listening, then you're also causing another whole problem for yourself, because it not only erodes the trust, but you become an unauthentic leader, because they're like, okay, they're acting like they're listening and they're acting like they're going to do it, but then they're really just yesing me. I could give you a good example with that, where we brought up a lot of ideas for marketing to improve the processes and flow and the engagement with a product. And it was, yes, 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 we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then they did it one time, and that was it. Back to the normal processes. So that didn't change the issue that there was no engagement, especially in today's environment where engagement with your customer, engagement with your suppliers, engagement with your team is the whole premise of making sure not only that you're listening, but that you're leading based on the knowledge that they've given you. So, you know, leadership requires consistency in the listening and the application of what they've heard, not just saying, yes, I hear you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that there are some systems in place to cultivate an EQ in the workplace. So, do you want to share maybe some of them?
Sure. So let's talk about recognizing and reframing the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first step in emotional intelligence is acknowledging everybody's ideas, their thoughts, their biases, etc. But you just can't go in there and say, hey, what do you think? Groupthink won't allow people to come out of the closet and tell you really what they're going to do, right? Or what they really think about the problem. So you have to reframe the challenge through your communication and your actions. So if you're coming into a board meeting, for instance, you got to recognize that there's a specific challenge. Maybe you have some data. Maybe you have some say, today we're going to adopt, a new method, a people first mentality, but we really got to get your input. And it could be through brainstorming. It could be through any of the, innovative models to do that. But when you reframe the challenge and you start listening, then you have to practice the emotional regulations that comes from what a lot of people that have studied business look at as the normal team process, which is the storming, and then you go from storming, which is the where everybody gets in a room and they're trying to become the power winner, and then you have the norming where everybody settles down for a second, and then you have the performing, which is
Yeah.
where they start doing better as a team and performing the way you want to. And then you have the adjourning because the challenge is addressed or whatever. So you go back and you train your mindset to focus on reframing the challenge and reducing the storming to being a mindset where people can control their emotions and listen and practice the regulation of those emotions in the room to develop a more manageable stress tolerance of the team so they can hear the accounting department talk about the budget constraints. They can hear the sales department talking about they need more manpower. You can hear that the operational area is saying, but that's going to cost more paper clips or whatever, whatever the cost it's going to do to hit that milestone. They can hear the people in the data department saying, okay, but the data says if we do this, we can have 20% growth. And you can hear it and you can hear the challenges, and you reframe it in a method that becomes the new vision and the new mission of whatever that process is. It may not be for the whole company, but you're aligning it back then to the whole company to hit their mission. How does it even change the mission, if it does, or vision of the company? If it changes the mission and the vision, is this something we really want to tackle? You have to think about that, because if you change the mission and the vision of the organization, that means a lot of things are going to change. So you go in and you develop that mindset that things are about self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. But then you go back and you develop resilience back into the model to make sure it aligns with the purpose and that everybody in the room knows what their part of it is. If you're in accounting, You know that, there's going to be some more money coming in operations. Where are the things that you can cut to keep those costs down? If you're in the data area, what can you do to make sure that you're meeting those milestones so that the cost included doesn't hurt the organization's bottom line? But then when you build that resilience model, everybody knows what's happening and it changes the general mood. The mood becomes more joyful and happiness because you have the same vision.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much, Rhonda. And before we end our call today, tell us a little bit about what you do and how can people find you.
Sure. So I try to make it easy for everybody to find me because we're all worldwide now. And so I was like, my website is rhondaparkertaylor.com. You can find my business Intelligent Solutions, by the link there. You can find the books that I'm writing or have written. There you can find the links. You can find my social medias there. So it's easiest to do it that way. And then you can find all the other products and services. What do I do? I'm a leader of an organization. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an author, both in fiction and in the self-help space. And I'm an academic researcher, which is why, we're talking about emotional intelligence. That was my first big study for the United Nations. We tested global leaders, multinational leaders, and domestic leaders worldwide to find out how they work in the emotional intelligence model and what skills are they high in and what's the difference between the two types of leaders.
That's incredible. And thank you so much, Rhonda, for being here today with me and sharing all that wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you have a blessed evening. I'm so happy that we got to finally get together. And, it's been a couple of months now that we've been talking and trying to plan this for everybody. So everybody out there that wants to know more about emotional intelligence or how to be a better leader, make sure that you follow, because that's the biggest thing, and share, because as women work together and men, we're not totally inclusive, but men and women work together, we can be better leaders and make a difference in this country.
For
and
sure.
the world.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Rhonda Parker. And if you like this episode, please share it with anyone you think can get value from it. And don't forget to subscribe From a Woman to a Leader podcast so you never miss an episode. And before you go, I just want to give you a sneak peek of next week's episode. Next week, I'm speaking with Kristin Zhivago, and she is a woman who started her first company at the age of 28. And she made it in Silicon Valley and has been thriving ever since. And she has done all of that without buying into the myth that you have to become someone you are not in order to succeed. So Kristin and I talk about what it really means to succeed in the men's world and how to deal with toxic people at work, why confidence isn't about power. It's about treating yourself like someone you love. Self-love is super important. So, if you ever felt like you had to toughen up to be taken seriously, this episode is certainly for you. And I resonate so much with this episode because I felt the same way. I felt that I needed to become someone I'm not in order to lead. As always, make sure to follow the show and to share it with friends. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And I'll see you next week on my episode with Kristin Zhivago. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.